Hi guys, alright, another video. In this video I'm going to show you how we can use a trig identity that we're very familiar with, that is sine squared a plus cosine squared a is equal to 1, and with a little bit of algebra we can rearrange that equation so that it says something else. Equivalent, but something else. So that's expressed not in terms of sine and cosine, but in terms of tan and sec. Alright, so let me get to it. So if we start with, again, this expression that we're all now very familiar with. Sine squared a plus cosine squared a is equal to 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides of this equation by cosine squared a. So I'm going to divide this by cosine squared a. And this here also by cosine squared a. Right? So I've divided both sides by cosine squared a. What does that give me? Well, here I have sine squared a over cosine squared a. Remember that sine over cosine is tan. So sine squared over cosine squared is tan squared. So this part here is tan squared a. Plus my second term. Well, cosine squared a over cosine squared a, well, that's just going to be 1. That's going to be 1. So I have here 1 is equal to 1 over cosine squared a. Okay. Remember that sec of a is by definition 1 over cosine a. So the sec of a is 1 over cosine. So therefore, 1 over cosine squared is sec squared. I'll say that again. Sec of a is 1 over cosine. And so therefore, sec squared is equal to 1 over cosine squared. All right? And so what I have here on the right-hand side of my equation is 1 over cosine squared a. Well, that now is actually sec squared a. I can rewrite it as sec squared a. And that's it. This is another relatively well-known equation right here. That tan squared a plus 1 is equal to sec squared a. Tan squared a plus 1 is equal to sec squared a. Just be aware that it is nothing other than sine squared a plus cosine squared a is equal to 1, something, like I said, we're very familiar with, rearranged by dividing both sides of that equation here by cosine squared a, which gives us, brings in tans and brings in sec. Okay, let's now use this identity right here to solve a problem. So I'm going to solve one of the problems that is in the problem sheet that is linked down below in this video. All right, I am going to solve problem number 15. I'm going to solve problem number 15, which is the following. 1 minus sine squared a times tan squared a plus cosine squared a is equal to 1. Bear in mind, in all of these problems, what we're asked to do is prove that the statements are true. So 1 minus sine squared a times tan squared a plus cosine squared a. We want to show that all of this is in fact simply equal to 1. Okay, how will we go about it? Well, hopefully you're starting to maybe spot some identities pretty quickly at this point. One that I would hope that you would spot is that 1 minus sine squared a, that is simply cosine squared a. 1 minus sine squared a is cosine squared a. So this here is cosine squared A times tan squared A. And I have here, of course, cosine squared A. We want to see, is this equal to 1? That's what we're looking for. All right, well, on the left-hand side, in this term, I have a cosine squared A, and in this term, I have a cosine squared A. So I'm going to factor that out. I'm going to factor out cosine squared A from both sides. So that gives me cosine squared A on tan squared A plus, if I factor out cosine squared A out of this, I'm left with 1. That's equal to 1. Okay, I have cosine squared A times tan squared A plus 1. Well, we just had the tan squared A plus 1 is actually just sec squared A. Okay, so I can write that this is cosine squared A on, instead of tan squared A plus 1, we now know that tan squared A plus 1 is sec squared A. And our question is that equal to 1? Can we make this equation, can we show that this equation is true? Sec squared A, well again, sec is 1 over cosine. So sec squared is 1 over cosine squared. So this is 1 over cosine squared. And look at this, I have cosine squared A times sec squared A, I'm going to write 1 over cosine squared A. So I have cosine squared A times 1 over cosine squared A. Is that equal to 1? Sure. Cosine squared A, this is simply cosine squared A over cosine squared A. And sure enough, that is equal to 1. Cosine squared A over cosine squared A is equal to 1. And so there you have it. This is, like I said, question number 15 in the problem sheet. And that is it completed. Okay? Thank you very much.